So here we're coming up to the end of this terrible war. As a textbook points out on 860, that by July of 1944, 2.8 million German soldiers had died. In the remaining 9 months of the war, another 4.8 million were killed. And we're just talking about Germans. And remember that I mentioned that the loss of U.S. soldiers was going to even be under 500,000. So I don't know. I think that we should really think about that. Okay, what we're going to see is while the United States suffered probably one of the least from World War II, when we came in, because we were in such healthy shape compared to other countries, for one, we're going to be a significant role in helping end the war. So that part I don't want to play down. I just want to remind us, though, of the difference of way that our wars were experienced. The U.S. soldiers saw all of the horrors of this wars, but the majority of us as citizens and civilians did not. While people in France, England, Germany, Russia, on and on and on and on, saw their houses carpet bombed, poverty, famine, gang rapes by soldiers, tortures, imprisonment, no food, no clean water. You get the point. Okay, so we talked about Allied victory, the decisive front. As we saw here, the invasion of Italy. It was assumed that Stalin was wanting the Allies to help release some pressure and create a second front. And the British and American forces did land in Sicily, and it was assumed by Churchill, he said Italy is the soft underbelly of German-controlled Europe. But geography always is significant, as Afghanistan always, has proved time and time again. I don't care how powerful your militaries are. Geography can be very difficult. And as it mentioned in this text book, that rigid, with mountains and laced with rivers, the Italian peninsula formed a natural defense fortress. In an 8-month period, Allied forces advanced only 70 miles. And that, again, has to do with some of the issues of geography. Again, let me look at Afghanistan. The average person's weapon that has one in Afghanistan has an AK-47. The people of Afghanistan have been able to take on British, Soviet invasions and U.S. invasions, and they're fighting far more superior military forces. But, I was one Marine in my class, and he said sometimes you would have to walk in these mountain areas where these huge, massive mountains and these exposed roads that you walk on, and he would tell me, here we are, these specially trained Marines, and there's like a 12-year-old kid or some young guy up high up on the mountain cliff just picking you off like a sniper. And there's nothing that your technology can do about that. When you have rough terrain, you can't get supply lines through. Okay, these are the kind of things that can happen in war. So geography can really change the dynamic, even in modern times. Okay, it's just something to think about. So where did things really switch things up? It mentions here in the text, the European war was thus decided not in the mountains of Italy, but in the east. Beginning in the summer of 1943, the Soviets steadily pushed back the Germans on a front that ran from Leningrad to the far north of the Crimea in the south. And here's, I think, what's really significant. It mentions they were some of the largest military confrontations in history. An estimated 75% of German military losses in World War II came from the Eastern Front. Again, we're talking about the ability of the Russians now to go from being on the defensive to now coming out on top and pushing back through Europe. Okay, And Russia was actually, their wartime efforts, they were able to manufacture many more tanks and anti-tank guns, doubling Germany's. Okay, um, all the time using a communist economy, by the way, which is going to be influential on many intellectuals later on. Stalin's legacy here, just to quickly say, is going to make him rightfully later on seen as one of the most evil men, but also he's going to be very popular with the West because think about him as a symbolic leader of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union is on the Allied side here, and Russia, with their economy that's an alternative to the capitalist system, is able to pull through this war. And later we're going to just see how significant, because it's Stalin who's going to get the credit for defeating Hitler, which also is something else I'm going to address more later on. Okay. So then here's our role. Now we jump in. We know the story D-Day. Now that's what we all know, right? D-Day. And it's important. Okay, it's when 150,000 Allied troops landed on the shores of northern France to open an effective second front against German-occupied Europe. And that was, 5 seaborne divisions, 2 American, 2 British, and 1 Canadian. Let's always include the Canadians in this, please. The Canadians need to be given a shout out every now and then a lot more. They're not really, looked to in history that much. They're just not brought up. But yes, the Canadians were also playing a major role in this. And basically, the advantage was quite there, like pretty significant. But the Germans did put up a good fight. So that was the case. Ultimately, though, the Allies were going to be able to finally break through. Okay, now as the troops pushed through on Germany from the west, as the textbook says, the Soviets accelerated their onslaught in the east. So just over 2 weeks after D-Day and 3 years to the day since Germany had invaded the Soviet Union, I'm reading part of the text here on 862, the Soviet army mounted Operation Bagration. We hear about D-Day all the time. We don't hear about this one, right? Described by one historian as the most overwhelming single military assault in history. Well, what would make him say that? Look at this. 2.5 million Soviet troops attacked along a 450-mile front that ran from the Baltics through Belarus. Okay? And we saw tank units there within reach of Warsaw. This is where Hitler's whole vision of the Third Reich fell apart. And this is where Stalin and the Soviet Union is going to get a lot of street cred with a lot of people. Okay? Think about this here. If you see in the textbook, 320,000 Germans, mainly young boys, were left to fight 3 million Soviet troops. I don't even understand. I can't even comprehend that. And so, there was some hard fighting on behalf of the Germans, but obviously they were going to lose. And ultimately, Hitler is going to commit suicide, realizing that it's over, it's done. All right. Here's a tragic picture. This is another one. Here, right, 10 days later from this picture, he's going to kill himself. This is the German soldiers. These are the German soldiers that he's going to egg on to die for him. Okay, it's very sick. These young boys are going to be taking on the Soviet war machine, and he's not going to have the courage to stand himself to face the consequences of these wars that he unleashed. But these young boys are going to stand their ground on behalf of his cause. Again, very tragic. And it should also remind us that when we talk about the demonization of the Nazis, and I'm no way trying to not demonize them, these young boys were Nazis. Okay? Are these pure evil boys, regardless of what their thoughts were and what they were going to be doing? I don't know what these guys did. But, wars bring in eventually everybody. I think it's fair to say that once your country is at war and when you're now fighting foreign enemy soldiers, no matter what the ideology of your regime is, you're probably going to fight for that cause. And in these cases, you didn't even have a choice. Even for Americans, we don't have a draft now. You didn't have a choice. When these wars happened all the way up to the Vietnam War, you went to prison if you didn't go to war when you were called. That's what the draft was for. So, these leaders of all countries have utilized young men, and they've also mobilized women as well. But often it's been the men that they've viewed to be the ones to participate in a war, to do these things. Okay. And so, I don't know, it's something that's kind of unfortunate to think about, but I think is significant because it's very easy to take that line of like, oh, the evil German Nazi, and forget that you had maybe a 14-year-old boy who, is having this fatherly figure tell him, hey, you're German and we're fighting evil Russians, and now they're being invaded. I have a hard time calling this boy evil, even though he's fighting on the wrong side of the war under a very disturbing ideology. Okay. And I don't know. I just think that's, as historians, what we do is you end up looking at the whole world from this totality. And it's not that I don't take sides on things. In World War II, I would have sided with the Allies. That's what I would have did that. Right. And I'm proud of my family members who participated to side on the side of the Allies. But I want to break these silly, unfortunate oversimplifications that we get when we think about these historical moments. Because I think if we did think about them a little more deeper, we would be more cautious about what we think about war. We would have a more sound approach and thought about these topics instead of these oversimplified kind of Star Wars version. There's the dark side and there's the good rebels, and it's pure good versus pure evil. And, we're going to move on to the next section, and we're going to be addressing where it gets complicated, which is the air war, the atom bomb, from us, the good guys. And what does that mean? Okay, so that'll be for the next lecture.